right now. There we go. Once more, welcome everybody. My name is Dr. Miku Lenatine, and I'll be coordinating the seminar, or rather facilitating the seminar today. And let me just see if I can pull up the bio here. All right, so it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome in Dr. Mohammad Ali to present today, Chapter 10. And for those that are coming in and are not as familiar with the book, it's Cultivating Q Methodology, Essays Honoring Stephen R. Brown, and that was released in April. And so this is an amazing book, and it's been a little while since I posted the information into the chat. So if you haven't had a chance yet to look at it, I'm just going to put it in there with a link so that people can take a look at that, consider ordering it so that we can follow along with all these wonderful presentations. And so Dr. Mohammad today will be presenting Chapter 10 of this issue, and let me pull up the title. You think I have them all memorized now. The Deceptive Power of Fake News, Perception of Believability Around Visuals, News Media, Social Media, and Shared Values. And so wanted to read a little bit about Mohammad's bio here. He earned his PhD in Mass Communications from Newhouse School at Syracuse University. And currently he's doing his second PhD in Information Sciences at the University of Maryland College Park. The areas of his research interest include computational social science, strategic communication, fake news, and health informatics. A former journalist, Ali has got his research works published and accepted in reputed journals, including the International Journal of Strategic Communication, Atlantic Journal of Communication, Visual Communication Quarterly, International Journal of Mobile Communications, and the Journal of Quantitative Description. And there's a number of other journals that had acronyms. So I'll let you read those for yourself. But also, of course, he's presented at a number of conferences, including the Science and Study of Subjectivity, our annual Q conference. So with that, I'd just like to welcome you, Mohammed. And what we'll do is, depending on your length of your presentation, I'll still do a soft close on the hour, but there'll be an invitation to stay after the hour to chat with you and ask further questions if people are really still engaged and want to stick around. So with that, I'll hand it to you, and looking forward to hearing your talk. Oh, and you're on mute.
So sorry. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we're good.
Great. Thank you so much, Professor Miku, for inviting me to present our paper. I'm so much grateful and honored to be here. And first of all, I also thank Professor Brown for being here. I'm very, very honored for that. Also, thank you for Dr. Kinsey. I worked with him at Syracuse University in this research project. So, and I also learned Q methodology from him. So this is my great pleasure of working with Dr. Kinsey. So our paper is in the part of application of Q methodology in this book. So let me start my PowerPoint. So yeah, so our paper's topic is deceptive power of fake news, perception of believability around visuals, news media, social media, and shared values. I'll try to finish probably a little early so that we can have some time for question, answer, and discussion. Hopefully we'll have a nice discussion about Q methodology and its application. So little background of our research projects. It's about fake news. However, in the discipline, this term is also used as misinformation, disinformation, little bit different definitions. But it's all about something that deception created in the content to fool or deceive people. And the idea of fake news is actually not new. it has been there for centuries, and sometimes it has been used as a propaganda in public relations, strategic communication sometimes, and it started widely spreading since 2016 US elections, and scholars started or studying this idea of fake news in USA, also outside USA. So some of the area of fake news studies that spread how people's intention, how to detect fake news or effects. I'll look at a little bit more in next slides. So this is very important term here, like deception. That's one of the main point of our research. This is also the central aspect of fake news, like the deception. And generally, the primary purpose or like main purpose of fake news to deceive people, to tell something so that people believe that's not true, and probably they act differently based on that perceived truth, but that's not actually true. So that's on types of deception, and this is also established or described by different scholars. Like it's fundamentally directed to deceive people and make them believe something that's not true. So until now, we have a lot of research on this topic, and most of the top from the communicator perspectives. For example, like how the people who create fake news, what's their intention, or how they make a influence, or how their deception can be detected. Uh, so with probably some algorithm or other tools. However, from the audience perspectives, like how people really believe that fake news, or how people are deceived, or what kind of fake news features people are believe or deceived by. So that's not the area much researched yet. So so this is like connected with the people's perception, because we are trying to connect with the contents frames, like how a fake news content is framed in a different way that make people believe that content uh, with like lower or higher salience, or drawing people's attention to particular content or topic. At the same time, there is another part of the fake news, that's the confirmation bias. It's from the social psychology. Like people tend to believe something that's they already make connection with their existing belief. So that's connected to confirmation bias. And with that saying, so I'm talking about little bit present studies. Like some of the studies talks about like how a fake news velocity is, or what are the dimensions of the fake news, like different types or categories of fake news, and sometimes are the effects of fake news, and how we can detect fake news, and what we can do actually to combat the fake news, kind of like of media literacy. And this is the part in confirmation bias in social psychology that's connected with our research of perception, people's perception, and their belief of fake news. So with that background that I have talked about a little bit in my first slide, that communicator perspective and audience perspective in the fake news. So our research falls in the audience perspective. That's not researched much yet. So our intention is to look at the audience perspectives, how people how various content or features of the fake news are more likely fool or deceive an individual. So it's kind of like deception and like engaging people and deceiving people, uh, not how the fake news is actually created or uh, prepared. So we are not looking at that first part. We are looking at like after fake news created, how different features deceive people. So here's the research questions, specifically what uh, characteristics of fake news content do people perceive as most likely or and most unlikely to deceive people? Uh, key methodology. So what we did, we actually developed a concourse with 32 item Q sample, and the content includes like different media, different types of media content that include like visual, then social media content, and also I collected contents from mainstream news media and satire, like different types of features. We try to include as much as we can explore. That's a part of like fake news features. Uh, and while doing that, we have used first we have collected tweets like with the fake news keywords from using a Sysomos. It's software that helps to help collect the tweets. So from that tweets, we have manually looked at what are the uh, content or features people might be deceived, or talking about that content might deceive people. We also look at like journal articles that studied fake news media reports, and informal interviews like personal communication talks with the people. These are the all sources we have used to develop our concourse. And then we have used a snowball system. Uh, we have designed a questionnaire on VQ method, and we had like 92 source total. It's like more than 60. So we tried to go a little bit 60, but we ended up like finally quite a lot. So it's 96 and 92 source. So in the analysis, we have analyzed the rankings are analyzed, correlated and factor analyzed with the PQ software, PQ method software. So here's the interface we have used, and some of a few examples of the statement that we have used for our research. Like one of the statement: fake news that supports a person's own belief or religion. So that's most likely or most unlikely deceive people. Or fake news shared by family members, or fake news shared by mainstream news media. So these are some of the statements that we have used. And finally, we asked some questions, open-ended questions, why they have selected these 3 extreme left and 3 extreme right, like, and some demographic questions as well that we have analyzed in our in and report in our results section. So we have found 3 factors here. First factor is like visual, seeing is believing, and like 31 sorters are around in this factor, and they have highlighted like visual aspects of fake news, and they said that's probably more likely to fool or deceive people. And here you can see there's some 2 sources like fake news that's on video, and fake news that appears in a photograph and it's loaded here two statements. And one of the comments like people made, like people believe photographs are real and cannot lie. So here you can see like how people's beliefs are like being shaped. Like they trust a photograph because they think that photographs cannot lie and this seems real. So that means like when fake news is really reflected or prepared with the photographs that are most likely to believe, I mean, deceive people, and people most likely believe that fake news. So this is one of the factor. Another one is like social media. We have found 8 sorters here, and you can see like fake news. That's one video is sorted most likely to be believed. I mean, in this factor we have found video is also loaded quite high, but you can like from the comments we have named this factor as social media. Like you can see that most young people do not watch or read traditional news and get most of their news from social media, which makes the majority of our youth susceptible to fake news. So along with the like visual aspects of fake news, the aspect of social media comes here. That's why we are naming it social media factor, and probably that's something we can explore further. Like what are the more insights, or what are the further insights that's really people believe of social media content, uh, uh, fake news. So, but that's really interesting findings here. Another one is like shared belief. So here is 42 sorters, and can see like fake news that supports a person's own religion or belief. That's one statement loaded here. Another one is fake news that supports a person's own political party or leaders. So we have talked about like the visual content, social media, and here is another aspect, like whether it's a visual, social media, if we hear something from people, we share same value belief. That's really another thing. We probably believe more, trust more, and that's another thing might deceive us if that's used in a fake news content. So that could be like the religious leader, political leaders. It could be like close friends or someone who we really trust or share our belief or values. So that's interesting thing. Another factor. So along with these 3 factors, we have found some consensus items like mainstream news media outlets. If we see something that's coming from New York Times or is coming from a reputed news organizations, so normally we believe that news organization doesn't lie or doesn't uh, deceive people, or they generally cross-check information before publication or before releasing to the public. So that's probably another thing people have in their mind. So all of the people like is consensus. The participants are in consensus that the mainstream news media more likely to deceive people if it carry a fake news or misinformation. And at the same time, like you can see like some unknown websites, unknown news releases, that's unlikely to fool people. That's probably like that doesn't have any website name or source name. Probably that's have lack of trust or credibility. But the interesting thing is that some other research found that when like shared value comes in, or if the visual content comes in reflecting fake news content, people sometimes really doesn't look at the website name or source of the content. So that's interesting thing. If they found source, that's probably uh, prevents them from believing fake news. However, if uh, because of their like confirmation bias, they probably doesn't look at or the website or source name doesn't get their attention higher because of confirmation bias. That's like interaction is really interesting. I think that's should be explored further. Which one is coming fast? Which one is coming next in terms of deceiving people when they come across a fake news? But these are the content like uh, uh, people really are susceptible or at risk of believing fake news. Okay, that's results, and the discussion is like interestingly, you already have observed that not all fake news items are viewed as deceiving to all people in the same way. That means like the certain people believe that visual content most likely to deceive people, and some other people are talking about like shared values. So fake news deceive people that might not in the same way to all people. uh, that's an interesting thing, and that's because of probably people think differently. They have like different types of confirmation bias or some other experiences. So that's I think another thing, like why people what are the factors that make people believe fake news differently. So that could be another interesting thing to explore further. And I think it's really interesting, like Q methodology. It's providing some insights, also some food for future research. And I think that's so much interesting for further exploration. So uh, some at the same time, like some people agree, like what are the content that deceive all the people, and that's mainstream and unknown news media. And I said like some studies have looked at like explore people normally doesn't I mean all the time doesn't look at the news source when they come across with like their close friends or some people who close their connection in the network. If they share something, probably source is less important. But that's people talk about in this research, because I think it's a probably it's a subjective perception. They use their uh, uh, like thoughts deliberately, but when it comes to the like unconscious thoughts. So the the function of fake news or deception of fake news might function differently. But this paper is actually like conscious thoughts, is kind of like the subjective perceptions. So that might be different when people think unconsciously. So combination of multiple elements could be more deceptive. That's an interesting thing. I'll share like visuals in the next slides. So I have talked about like deception is a central aspect. So this is kind of like you can probably recognize that it's not same all the scenarios. So sometimes it's low and sometimes it high, like that deception, like visual, social media, shared values, known, unknown. So sometimes it's a deception is high, sometimes it's low, and it's sometimes it's low to some people, and same content might be high deceptive to another people. So interesting thing here. So that's another interpretation of our results. Like, so we have to look at like individual statement or fake news features. But however, if multiple features comes in together, like mainstream news media, so that's in the consensus item. So if the fake news appeared in the mainstream news media and shared by close friends in a visual content, so that probably would be much more powerful than an individual feature like only mainstream news media that deceive people. So certain or multiple features, if combined together to spread a fake news, that's probably more powerful in terms of deceiving people. And we should be careful about that when we see like multiple elements. It comes together, probably we can um, caution our thoughts when we come across this kind of content. Okay, the contribution and implications of our study, it's kind of like a new if not a new, but I would say it's kind of the area that's not much research yet. It's a audience perspectives, and most of the research is in the communicator perspectives. So our contributions results, it's shed light a deeper insights and understanding from the audience perspectives, and that could be useful sometimes probably to design future fake news studies. And I would say like the strategic communicators or public relations professionals can utilize these insights when they face the fake news crisis. They can look at like how the severity of the crisis and how deceptive a fake news, and who are their audience. Like not all the audience are deceptive in the same way to all the content. So I think that's kind of dimensions of the fake news deception could be helpful for strategic communicators to devise their strategies and even to understand the fake news crisis. And finally, like we have provided and offered 5 categories of fake news items that matters differently when we talk about like how it deceive people and in different content. Limitations, though, this study actually is not about like the real fake news content. We have used a statement, so that's part of Q study, but definitely we can use a real fake news probably, but that could be like different design probably. So that's the only limitations. We have used statement, not the exact real fake news. And from the demographic perspectives, most of the participants were female and Democrats. Future research, I would say that I have already talked about few points while presenting our research. However, we think the survey could be future research to understand why certain fake news contents are more deceptive than others. And another thing, this key methodology offered insights that could be used in a future experiment to understand the causal effects. Like fake news are more deceptive or fake news are less deceptive, how that impact or influence people's actions in terms of when it harms an organization's reputation, for example, or trust, or it affects people's purchase intention of a company products. So that could be like multiple dependent variables, but the insights could be useful in an experimental study as well. Yeah, thank you so much. I really ended up with like less than half an hour. I really appreciate your patience hearing, and I'll be really happy to have your questions and feedback for my future research.
All right, let's give a round of applause. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to wait and would love to open up the floor if you'd like to just unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can use the little hand emoji or type into the chat. Really interesting topic. Yeah, so just go ahead and chime in with your questions and we can go from there.
Mohammad, I have a question. This is Vivian Hardison. And thank you so much for your presentation. It was very interesting. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. I believe you said something about you think people may choose differently if they acted unconsciously versus consciously. Did I get that right? Did you say that sort of? Okay. That being good. So that being the case, my question is, how would you be able to ascertain the difference between conscious versus unconscious thinking in terms of what they do? And secondly, what makes you think there will be a difference in the outcome if a person acted consciously versus unconsciously?
Yeah, thank you so much. And bringing this point to the question answer, I really appreciate that. So what I have been talking about, like our study used Q methodology. So that understands people's subjective perceptions.
Yes.
And it comes from their conscious thought process, right? They look at different statements and consciously make decision, like compare visual content with a social media content. They have that time to think about that. So, but when we came across a real fake news, let's say on Twitter, we don't think about a seconds probably. We just see the fake news on Twitter. Hey, these people shared this. We just within seconds we retweeted that content. So in a real scenario, probably we don't think that much. Our thought process works unconsciously more, I think. And in this study, it's people have had some time to think about that. Their thought process was more in the conscious way. So that's I'm thinking. So it's not part of our study, but I just draw a little different perspectives that some other studies look at. When people come across fake news, normally they don't pay attention to the source. Normally they don't pay attention to which which site is really a publishing. So they look at the content mostly. So, but this study look at found that the source, unknown source, are less likely to deceive people. But the real scenario, some studies found that people don't pay attention to the source. So that's the difference I try to say. That's probably because of that conscious and unconscious thought process. In the real scenario, people probably don't pay attention to the source because of their thought process works unconsciously. But when I think that this content is not from some reputed source or news organizations, so we thought in a conscious way, I'll not believe that because it's not from New York Times or in a reputed organization. But when I come across real fake news, I even don't look at the source sometimes. So that's, I try to say, probably that's the thought process function.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for question.
Gareth has Gareth had a hand up, and then after that, Joanna, I guess.
Oh, Joanna was definitely before me. Go ahead, Joanna.
Oh, okay, thanks. Oh, Joanna, you're on mute.
Of course I am. What I think is really interesting about Vivian's question is the way that Q gets at something that is gives a participant an ability to consider their responses versus what a lot of fake news, which is sort of, I wouldn't say unconscious, but maybe immediately conscious. And maybe something interesting to look at there would be Stanford's study on lateral reading, which has very interesting information about how people automatically fact check things versus professional fact checkers. And so that sort of describes some of that immediate response. And what I would be interested in understanding better is the questions in terms of Q of thoughtfulness versus automatic responses, because there's so much good data on what is automatic, the way that amplifiers work, for example, the way that resharing or retweeting works. And so comparing perhaps what the data says on what that is to what a participant thinks that they're doing, right? So it's one of the powers of Q to me is the ability to create that moment where people reflect and maybe consider the choices they make versus the automatic choices they might be making. And so I think that maybe there's a lot of really good work that's been done. I have a friend, Renee DeResta, who's done, I'll throw something in the chat she did on the Atlantic that's quite good in terms of amplifiers. But I think that where Q could really shine here is its ability to look at what people think their considered approach is versus what perhaps research shows they do automatically. Because it is a field where we have so much good automatic data. We have so many good measurements of where the clicks go, but maybe comparing that to what people consider that approach to be was one thought. I did have a question. If in your Q set you did include anything about amplification or choices among retweeting, especially because they leaned female and leaned Democrat, were there cases where they had retweeted fake news? Were there any comments in the Q set that allowed them to choose, yes, I had agency, I reshared, and here's why, in those ideas or not?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I think it's really interesting. And in terms of the question, we did not include that question whether they're retweeting or that thing, but we had a question like whether they have used Twitter. I mean, use social media or like that. I mean, I say social media. Probably no. Sorry, that's another study. No, we do not have any questions about that. Whether they have retweeted or not. That could be the interesting thing. Probably if we had that data. But our intention was like the content, and we have used like the social media as an umbrella term, but it could be really more insightful if we can differentiate like that's really more particular things like retweets or something like tweet, Facebook, or some other details. Yeah, that could be more insightful. And so we tried to little broader, like say we have looked at like the visual, sometimes the video, and that could be more insight, like video one, like Twitter, or like it could be like the what is that, extended reality. So that more details we can go further. Probably that could be interesting, but we didn't do that much. It's a little broader. Thank you for question.
Well, I'm glad we left lots of time for questions because we have lots of great questions. So let's go to Garrett, and then we'll go to Masatoshi with a number of questions in the chat. So Garrett, go ahead.
Thanks, Mohammad. Really great presentation, a really interesting topic. I know obviously all of us most of us being social scientists, it's a really important and fascinating area. I was particularly, I'm glad Joanna went before me because she articulated some of the things a bit better. I'm I'm particularly interested in how Q is used when you're talking subjectively about what you think you do against reality and what you think other people do. So it seems that your study is mainly about people criticizing other people and how they think about, how a sort of think about fake news, and in fact just the framing of it being saying that it's fake news, because obviously people who may retweet it and believe it don't call it fake news, so they wouldn't identify it as fake news. So it feels that even the framing of the study is already assuming that you're being critical of the truthfulness of the topic. I was thinking of similar things, and maybe there's people on the call who know of studies. I'm thinking, say, religion would be a quite obvious one, where there's certain people who have a certain strong beliefs about something being true and correct, and other people have very strong beliefs in a different way. And obviously, and so I was thinking then about how does that make your your P set, your people, the people that are doing it, how are you getting people that think some news is not fake and some news is fake, and vice versa? And the most obvious thing at the moment with the news and stuff would be, say, around the attack on the Capitol and the election in the US, and there's many US folks here. So do you think about something like that and the news around that, then thinking about how you get people who had very strong beliefs about the truthfulness of, say, the US election outcome and how things have panned out on the attack on the Capitol, or something like that? I can imagine that being able to give you something that's a bit more to do with how people view news and information, as opposed to how people critically think about other people viewing news. I'm not sure if that's helpful, but it's and apologies, I haven't yet read your chapter, so I look forward to doing so afterwards. But feel any reflections, particularly on how you would go about doing it with actual fake news being considered by the participants of the Q study? That would be really great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, really, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for bringing this point. So I think it's really, really interesting. So, however, our paper is really designed more customized way, like just look at only the fake news part. So we have narrowed down our research paper on the background that there is fake news out there. Definitely fake news means there are real news. So there are some fake news. So how people believe that, what are the features of fake news are more deceptive or not. So we did not differentiate or try to understand how people, if people think about a news report as a real news or fake news, how that thought process or that understanding, we do not look at that. We just try to look at that, how people's perception about the fake news content, not the real news content. Only fake news content, what are the features are more deceptive to the people? What are the features of the fake news least deceptive to the people? So because there's a literature already out there that fake news content includes deception. So that means people are deceived by the fake news to believe something that's not true, but they think that that's true. So our paper's designed to understand only that part. We did not include real news. Even we did not talk about real news. We just talked about the fake news and their features. So that's the narrowed down part of our study. But I think that insights could be useful to further research in combination of real news. Probably if we can include some content from real news in a future research, that could be something more interesting and insightful. And these studies findings, insights could be used to compare with those results. And I think that could be more interesting as well. Thank you again for the question.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm putting into the chat again the link so that if you haven't had a chance to read the chapter yet, you can do that, because some of those maybe details might be in there too, but also so awesome to have you here so we can ask you directly. Masatoshi has a number of questions in the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Masatoshi. Did you want to speak to those?
Hello, thank you for your interesting reporting. I have 4 questions. First is that your research question asked what kind of content, but however, I think that is it really content issue after all? As you said in your conclusion, isn't the findings that who and how has greater impact on the perception of fake news in the end? So I think that who and how, telling by the who and how issue and the content issue is not the same level. It should be, I think, it's not the same category. I think that it is a different category. How do you think about that? That is the first question. And the second question is that fake news research, previous research issue pointed out echo chamber effect, especially on social networking site. It is kind of that social networking service create communities of similar mind people who follow similar people, as you said. And by that, resonance within particular community increase credibility within the participants of that community. So how do you see this? How do you think about this by this Q study? That is the second question. And third question is the range of the age of each factor. Factor B, as you said, social media, and commented that younger people do not watch traditional news, blah, blah, blah. However, it is said that fake news and conspiracy theories are often caught on not only young people, but also by the middle-aged elder people. For example, Japan is one of the most popular countries for Twitter, but it is often that the middle-aged and elder people who try to get the fake news and try to turn its social movement. How might that be explained? It's that a question. And the fourth one is that in last part, you mentioned experiment to understand causal effects. How can we measure such kind of causal effect? I think that is the next step for the Q methodology, but I think it's difficult to maybe look at questionnaires or such kind of experimental questionnaires are necessary. How do you think about that issue? That is my question. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really think I appreciate your all questions. If I understood correctly, your first question is about content and who and how instead of content, how that looks like. So as I have like tried to develop our research background, like there are a lot of studies that looked at like who and how, like who is creating fake news or who is influencing and how that's really affecting people's attitudes, behaviors, and that's sometimes it harms others, like the company reputation, so harms company reputation or trust. So we are not looking at that part, actually, how fake news is really affecting that way. We are looking at the content. Specifically, we are looking at the fake news after it's created. After its creation, how that content, we're not looking at who is creating or how it's really affecting. We are looking at how some particular content or characteristics of the fake news deceiving people. We are not going beyond that, like how after deception people are doing something or harming some organization. We're not looking at that part as well. We are just confined in that area how that some content are more deceptive or less deceptive. This is important because based on that perceived deception, people take action after that. So if some fake news content is more deceptive to the people, that means people will believe that content more than the other media content if the same fake news is reflected in two content. So the content that's most deceptive, that is more dangerous, I would say, because that have the power to pursue or influence people to harm somebody. So we are confined in that part, like how some content or characteristics like the video fake news or fake news on social media or fake news shared by some religious leaders or political parties. So that content, we are just looking at that part, like how this is deceptive or least deceptive. That could be useful, like in terms of their next attitudes, people's next attitudes. I'm not sure how much I answered your questions, but that's the part I would say in our study. Similar people follow similar people on social media. I'd say that's really it's one of the main I think theoretical part of network analysis is really interesting. We actually did not include that much of these perspectives in our study, but one thing I think I would say, I'd argue that when it's about confirmation bias. So what I think or what I believe already, I try to believe similar things or similar people. I think that's could be connected with this network analysis aspects. For example, like people most likely believe the fake news content shared by like political party leaders or religious leaders. So I would say these like similar people probably, or similar values or shared values, same value they share. So that's a little bit connected, but we do not actually explain or interpret our findings in terms of in light of social network analysis aspects. But I think that's connected or related to that as well. And in terms of age, our study did not explain that much how like younger people or older people are believing fake news or being deceived by fake news. So we are more about like the how on the part of the fake news content or fake news features, characteristics. And in terms of experiment, I'd say this is my like the future research direction aspect. So if you say like how we can design a future experiment in light of our research findings, I can say one of the design could be like the content that are most likely fool or deceive people, and the content that are least likely to deceive people, how these two different content really influencing or influencing people to harm or like affect an organization trust could be one idea of experimental research. But it's not, I'm not like giving that details of experimental design, but I'm saying that insights could be useful to understand causal relationships like in a future research design. So this study, we did not really explain that much of experimental study design, but one idea could be like that, like how least the content is most likely to deceive, the content least likely to deceive, how these two different content, how differently influence people to harm or affect the company's reputation in a crisis situation. I think it's a crisis communication research idea could be really interesting. I'm not sure how did I answer your question?
Thank you very much. But I still think that content cannot be separated from process, who says and how it is believed. The process and content is, I think, different. So I think that it would have been better to design QSET in advance based on this item is process-oriented item and this item is content-oriented item. And by making QSET, Q concourse, Q items categorizingly, I think it makes better interpretation more. I thought. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. Thank you.
So we just have a couple more minutes till we hit the hour, and I just want to do a check. Are people feeling like they want to stay after for about 10 more minutes or so? I can only stay 10 today, actually. So I'm seeing heads nodding. Okay, I do also want to make sure we get the photo, and there's okay, so then we'll go to Stephen's kind of question here. It's a sort of a follow-up just in the chat. It said, and Stephen, if you wanted to speak to it, it sounds like you think that Q has taken us as far as it can, and the future progress is up to our methodology. Is that right? And then Stephen, feel free to add to that.
Excuse me, was that ball tossed to me?
Oh, if you wanted to
was that for Mohammad?
elaborate, if you wanted to elaborate, or just leave it that question.
I was just wanting to check back. Wasn't it said at the end that there are two ways forward, for further research? One of them was surveys and one was experiments. Have I misremembered, or was that what it was said? Because those are usually associated with our methodology,
Yes.
surveys and so forth. And does that imply then that the Q has done all it can, and that the real progress in the future is up to our methodology? Is that in essence what's being suggested?
I'm sorry, I could not get the point. I'm sorry for that. Did you ask?
At the end of your presentation, in fact, it may have been the final slide, you indicated future research.
Yes.
Were there not two aspects, one of them surveys and one of them experiments?
Yes.
Do I remember correctly?
Yeah.
Which are normally associated with our methodology. And I was wondering if you were implying that Q has taken us as far as we can, and that the future of studies of this phenomenon of fake news is really in the hands of our methodology. Or have I misunderstood what you were implying?
So yeah, so I try to say that that this aspect of fake news we try to understand using Q methodology, and this research definitely can be further extended using another Q study in a different scenario. But our suggestions is kind of like based on these findings of this Q study, we can further explore fake news, this idea using even different methodology as well. That the insights Q methodology insights can be used to understand further in a survey research method or in experimental research method. That means like survey or experiment can benefit from Q study findings to understand the same thing or the similar aspects of fake news like deception and relevant aspects. So that's like future, I think, in some direction, like how this Q methodology results can benefit another study, and it's a future research as well.
Well, I would urge you to consider that Q methodology actually emerged from 19th century studies in experimental aesthetics. It was the approach of experimentation in the field of aesthetics, and the works of Gustav Fechner, for example, back in the middle 1800s or something, that Stevenson regarded Q technique as being one of the methods of impression that not Fechner so much, but in B.B. Center's book on the psychology of pleasantness and unpleasantness, for example, he talks about the methods of impression and expression, and the Q methodology was considered an example of one of the methods of impression, but it was part of the experimental study of aesthetics and Stevenson's first book-length manuscript, which he never published, was on experimental aesthetics. In the study, the very short study he had about movies, for instance, talked about the importance of self-referentiality that Q methodology enables us to see the extent to which the self is involved in these things. And he was suggesting in that short paper that whether television would, by showing aggressive and violent movies, whether that would have the effect of creating more violent people or not. And his conclusion was no, that the only people that are going to get more violent are the people that already have that potentiality. But there are some people who don't identify with the violence. They might go enjoy seeing a movie that's about violence, but not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily lead them to go out and start shooting people necessarily, because it depends on things like identification. And in order to find that kind of thing, that you have to do Q-sort studies of asking people, for example, with your Q sample, to have them do a second Q-sort and say, which ones of these things is most like you, let's say. And then another Q-sort, think of the most violent person you know, or the person who's been most influenced by fake news. Which one, what would be their point of view? To instead of going out in surveys, or instead of trying to control things in that kind of experiment, do the kinds of experiments that Stevenson was suggesting in experimental aesthetics to show in what way is the self involved in these reactions. We've done one Q-sort. There are many other Q-sorts under different kinds of conditions. And that's what experimentation is to a large extent, is changing conditions to see what kind of effect they have on the outcome. And that by doing studies of that sort, particularly at the level of the individual case, you're apt to get a deeper understanding of the kind of impact or lack of impact that fake news has. There may be some people who don't identify with it, who enjoy telling stories and all of that kind of thing. They pass fake news around, but don't really identify with it. We don't know that. That remains something to be discovered. And so there are a lot of Q experiments that could be done that would be quite revealing of what's going on in terms of fake news. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up so much time, but I was just struck by that, what seemed to me to be an assumption that we have to now do our methodology studies. There's a lot more left to be done that would be far more telling and useful on the Q methodological side.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you so much, Professor Brown. I think that's really more Q sorts we can conduct. I mean, there are like multiple points remains unexplored, like when I was talking about the results. So I think, yeah, like different one of the, like each of the aspects could be another idea of Q sorts. Yeah, that would be really interesting. And if we can like put the participants in a different scenario and try to look at their subjective perception in a Q search, I think that would be, yeah, so much interesting.
I really want to thank you, Stephen, for that. That's such a helpful reminder. And I don't know if we have time to, I wrote it, it's like a burning question for me because this is such a present thing. Dr. Mohammad, I'm not sure if you've encountered this. So my question was, how might this new craze of AI image generators may have influenced the study if you did it now? Because I don't know about you all, but like on my Facebook feed, specifically the last month, maybe 2 months, it's just exploded. Every friend of mine, especially the younger ones, have all posted AI generated images of themselves. And it's just like, at least for me, making me rethink, well, what do I think is real? Like, wow. So, and it might be interesting to do this study again and like have that as an additional question. Have you ever heard of this thing? Or an interesting thing where they do it, and then if they've never had the AI experience, have them go do it. And then see how that might change their perspective. So yeah, I guess I was curious if that was on your radar at all, and maybe. Oh, and Gareth has added, it seems a periodic study like the one you presented today would be useful to track. Yeah, basically to track it as the fake news technology evolves. How are people's perceptions and understanding changing? Yeah, so interesting. So I don't know if we only have like a minute or so. If you wanted to comment on that, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Professor, did you ask me to make a comment on that?
If you wanted, yeah, or if you thought about that, because this AI image generation has just boomed recently, and I wondered at the time you collected your data, maybe it wasn't as prevalent.
Yeah, so we did not look at that, but definitely based on the results, we can make connection with that, because so AI is kind of like extension of people to some extent. I'd say like that's creating something that looks real probably, and sometimes one of the visual content, it's like deep fake. So you see like the same people and same voice, same thing. So that's mimics the real people. So that means our brain are being deceived more. So that means that kind of content really more deceptive, I think. And that could be, I think, analyzed in that of content in separate Q search as well. So that's another area of how different high level of visuals and like AI generated visuals are really working. And I think it would be really interesting how people are really believing that. Probably some people believe that it's AI. We don't believe that it's not something real people. Or some people might believe that it's really AI, so it doesn't make any mistake. So that's the true thing AI is talking about or present. So that could be like mixed findings or something interesting. That's really a new landscape of visual content for research.
Yeah, I think what changed it for me was me actually like doing it. One thing are like, oh, sure, different people have these algorithms, but like when and anyone can just go on there and do it, you're just like, wow. Well, let's just say my distrust of things is a lot less trustful now. But okay, we're right. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the studies I have been reading like this semester, it was like algorithm model and people's trust in that model. So when the model's accuracy level is disclosed to the people are least likely to believe that model's performance, because sometimes the model's performance rate is not disclosed, because no AI model is 100% perfect. Sometimes its accuracy level is 70% or 80%. that means it's making mistake rest of the 20% or kind of something. So when this information is disclosed, so people trust level goes down. So yeah, different dimensions are there to look at when we come across AI content.
Yeah, just to add, Vicky, what you were just suggesting sounded quite similar to what Steve was saying in terms of the ability to do that change it and experiment it before and after trying a new part of fake news.
Yeah, when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, let's have them all do their own AI profile and then see if that changes in an instant or not. All right, so I'm gonna have to hop off soon. So, but before we do that, again, maybe just a round of applause. Thank you so much for presenting. That was a really interesting presentation. And if you would put your contact information in the chat, people can follow up with you with further questions or reflections. And then if you would like to stay on for our holiday photo, you can turn your cameras on. You can put your any background on that you like, or if you happen to have a silly hat or whatnot, I'll give you a minute to do that. And if you would like not to be in the photo, you can turn your photo off. But I think we're doing it every year, so it's our new thing. Is everybody ready? Looks good. Yeah. Okay. Oh, very nice, Rita. Okay. Okay. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. Cheese. All right. I think I grabbed it there. Okay, I'll send that out just for this group. So thank you again, everybody. Have a wonderful holidays, whatever it is that you're celebrating. I believe we're still meeting. Can I get a show of hands of people that want to come next week? It's Boxing Day. Okay, if they're okay, let's do it. Let's do it. We love Q. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Mohammed and Miku.